following account comes from the journal of Conrad von Uffenberg, a German visitor who travelled through England in 1710. This particular entry is dated June 18th.
18th of June, 1710. In the afternoon, we went to see the cockfighting. This is a sport peculiar to the English, which, however great the pleasure this nation takes in it, seems very foolish to foreigners. A special building has been erected for it near Gray's Inn. When there is to be a fight, printed bills are carried round, and sometimes invitations to fanciers appear in the news sheets, as well as the amount of the wages and the number and species of cocks that are to fight. The building is round, like a tower, and all around inside are benches in tiers. In the middle is a round table covered with mats on which the cocks have to fight. When it is time to begin, the persons appointed to do so bring in the cocks hidden in 2 sacks, and then, before they have seen the birds, everyone starts to shout their wages. The people, gentlefolk as well as commoners, they all sit together, act like madmen, and go on raising the odds to 20 guineas and more. Then the cocks are taken out of the sacks and fitted with silver spurs. As soon as the cocks appear, the shouts grow even louder, and the betting is continued. When they are put onto the table, some attack at once, while others run away from the rest, and, as we ourselves saw, trying in their fright to jump down from the table among the crowd. They are then, however, thrown back with loud cries, especially from those who have put their money on the lively cocks which chase the others, and are thrust at each other until they get angry. Then one should just see how they peck at each other, and especially how they hack with their spurs. Their combs bleed quite horribly, and they often slit each other's crop and abdomen with the spurs. There is nothing so amusing as when one cock seems quite exhausted, and there are great shouts of joy and terrific bets, and then, though he seemed quite done for, he suddenly recovers and masters the other. When one of the two is dead, the victor never fails to start crowing and jumping on the other, and it often happens that they sing their song of triumph before victory is assured, and the other wins after all. Sometimes when both are exhausted and neither will attack the other again, they are removed, and others take their place. In this case, the wagers are cancelled, but if one of them wins, those who put their money on the loser have to pay immediately, so that an ostler in his apron often wins several guineas from a lot. If a man has made a bet and is unable to pay, he is made, as a punishment, to sit in a basket tied to the ceiling and is drawn up in it amidst mighty laughter.
In feudal Japan, where honour and the sword reigned supreme, samurai duels were both deadly displays of skill and reflections of a strict warrior code. The samurai code, or bushido, emphasised loyalty, honour and courage, and a duel was often seen as a way to uphold these principles. One rare first-hand account comes from judo master Sakujiro Yokoyama, who witnessed one of these duels as a boy in the city of Edo. In this riveting account, a lone ronin, a samurai without a master, faced off against 3 samurai in a battle that would push the boundaries of martial prowess and sheer resolve. Sakujiro Yokoyama describes the events as follows.
I can recall the days when all samurai carried 2 swords and were prepared to use them when necessary. As a young boy, I accidentally witnessed a thrilling duel to the death between a ronin and 3 samurai. The fight took place in my Kojamachi ward near Kudan, where the Shukoncha now stands. But before continuing, I should explain to my foreign listeners the customs that were commonly observed by the 2-sworded men of the old feudal era. The samurai's sword was considered more precious than life itself, and touching a samurai's sword was considered an insult to their dignity. In those days, it was considered extremely rude for one samurai to allow the tip of their scabbard to touch the scabbard of another samurai as they passed each other on the street. This was called saya ate, and if the offender did not apologize promptly, a fight almost always followed. The samurai carried two swords, a long one and a short one, which were tucked into the obi, or sash, on the left side. The sheath of the longer weapon protruded behind the wearer's back. Because of this, it often happened, especially in crowds, that two scabbards would accidentally touch each other, even if neither samurai was looking for trouble. To avoid such conflicts, samurai who did not wish to fight would typically hold their swords with the point downward and as close to their sides as possible. However, if a collision of this kind did occur, the parties involved could not ignore it. One or both would immediately demand satisfaction, and the challenge was rarely refused. The high sense of honor that prevailed among samurai forbade them from backing down from the consequences of such an encounter. The incident I'm about to describe unfolded in precisely this manner. As I mentioned earlier, the duel involved a ronin and 3 samurai. The ronin was poorly dressed and clearly very poor. The sheath of his long sword was cracked and worn from years of use. He was a middle-aged man. The 3 samurai, on the other hand, were all rugged men and appeared to be under the influence of sake. They were the challengers. At first, the ronin apologized, but the samurai insisted on a duel, and the ronin eventually accepted the challenge. By this time, a large crowd had gathered, among which were many samurai, none of whom, however, ventured to interfere. In accordance with custom, the combatants exchanged names and swords were unsheathed. The 3 samurai on one side facing their solitary opponent, with whom the sympathies of the onlookers evidently lay. The keen blades of the duelists glittered in the sun. The ronin, seemingly as calm as though engaged merely in a friendly fencing bout, advanced steadily with the point of his weapon directed against the samurai in the center of the trio, and apparently indifferent to an attack on either flank. The samurai in the middle gave ground inch by inch, and the ronin as surely stepped forward. Then the right-hand samurai, who thought he saw an opening, rushed to the attack, but the ronin, who had clearly anticipated this move, hurried and with lightning rapidity cut his enemy down with a mortal blow. The left-hand samurai came on in his turn, but was treated in similar fashion, a single stroke felling him to the ground bathed in blood. All this took almost less time than it takes to tell. The samurai left standing, seeing the fate of his comrades, thought better of his first intention, and took to his heels. The victorious ronin wiped his blood-stained sword and returned it to its sheath. His victory was loudly applauded by the other samurai who had witnessed it. The ronin then proceeded to the neighboring magistrate's office to report the occurrence, as the law required.
Built as gargantuan tombs of shining white limestone, the Great Pyramids were designed to endure an eternity, and have done just that. For thousands of years they have prompted fantastic myths and legends, as well as real and baffling scientific riddles. But how did ancient Egyptians build these mausoleums? Centuries ago, Herodotus, a Greek explorer and scholar with an insatiable curiosity, journeyed to this ancient land. Standing before these stone giants, intrigued by their very existence, Herodotus documented not only their imposing stature, but also the stories swirling around their construction, which he relayed as follows.
Till the death of Rhampsinitus, the priests said Egypt was excellently governed and flourished greatly. But after him, Cheops succeeded to the throne and plunged into all manner of wickedness. He closed the temples and forbade the Egyptians to offer sacrifice, compelling them instead to labor, one and all, in his service. Some were required to drag blocks of stone down to the Nile from the quarries in the Arabian range of hills. Others received the blocks after they had been conveyed in boats across the river and drew them to the range of hills called the Libyan. 100,000 men laboured constantly and were relieved every 3 months by a fresh lot. It took 10 years' oppression of the people to make the causeway for the conveyance of the stones, a work not much inferior, in my judgment, to the pyramid itself. This causeway is 5 furlongs in length, 10 fathoms wide, and in height, at the highest part, 8 fathoms. It is built of polished stone, and is covered with carvings of animals. To make, it took 10 years, as I said, or rather to make the causeway, the works on the mound where the pyramid stands, and the underground chambers, which Cheops intended as vaults for his own use. These last were built on a sort of island, surrounded by water introduced from the Nile by a canal. The pyramid itself was 20 years in building. It is a square, 800 feet each way, and the height the same, built entirely of polished stone, fitted together with the utmost care. The stones of which it is composed are none of them less than 30 feet in length. The pyramid was built in steps, in a way some call rows and others call bases. After laying the stones for the base, they raised the remaining stones to their places by means of machines formed of short wooden planks. The first machine raised them from the ground to the top of the first step. On this there was another machine which received the stone upon its arrival and conveyed it to the second step, whence a third machine advanced it still higher. Either they had as many machines as there were steps in the pyramid, or possibly they had but a single machine which, being easily moved, was transferred from tier to tier as the stone rose. Both accounts are given, and therefore I mention both. The upper portion of the pyramid was finished first, then the middle, and finally the part which was lowest and nearest the ground. There is an inscription in Egyptian characters on the pyramid which records the quantity of radishes, onions, and garlic consumed by the labourers who constructed it. And I perfectly well remember that the interpreter who read the writing to me said that the money expended in this way was 1,600 talents of silver. If this then is a true record, what a vast sum must have been spent on the iron tools used in the work, and on the feeding and clothing of the labourers, considering the length of time the work lasted, which has already been stated, and the additional time, no small space, I imagine, which must have been occupied by the quarrying of the stones, their conveyance, and the formation of the underground apartments. The wickedness of Cheops reached to such a pitch that, when he had spent all his treasures and wanted more, he sent his daughter to the brothel, with orders to procure him a certain sum. How much I cannot say, for I was not told. She procured it, however, and at the same time, bent on leaving a monument which should perpetuate her own memory, she required each man to make her a present of a stone towards the works which she contemplated. With these stones she built the pyramid which stands midmost of the 3 that are in front of the Great Pyramid, measuring along each side 150 feet. Cheops reigned, the Egyptian said, 50 years, and was succeeded at his demise by Khephren, his brother. Khephren imitated the conduct of his predecessor, and like him built a pyramid, which did not, however, equal the dimensions of his brother's. Of this I am certain, for I measured them both myself. It has no subterraneous apartments, nor any canal from the Nile to supply it with water, as the other pyramid has. In that, the Nile water, introduced through an artificial duct, surrounds an island where the body of Cheops is said to lie. Khephren built his pyramid close to the Great Pyramid of Cheops, and of the same dimensions, except that he lowered the height 40 feet. For the basement he employed the many-coloured stone of Ethiopia. These 2 pyramids stand both on the same hill, an elevation not far short of 100 feet in height. The reign of Khephren lasted 56 years. Thus the affliction of Egypt endured for the space of 106 years, during the whole of which time the temples were shut up and never opened. The Egyptians so detest the memory of these kings that they do not much like even to mention their names. Hence they commonly call the pyramids after Felician, a shepherd who at that time fed his flocks about the place.
In the summer of 1244, King Louis IX of France lay gravely ill. Amidst his suffering, devastating news arrived. Jerusalem had fallen once more into the hands of the Muslim infidels. In a moment of profound devotion, the king vowed that if he recovered, he would dedicate himself to reclaiming the Holy City through a new crusade. Following his recovery, 4 years were spent meticulously preparing for the Seventh Crusade, which he launched in August 1248. Filled with fervent zeal, he and his army set sail to Egypt, the centre of Islamic power and the lifeline of the Ayyubid Sultanate. As the Crusaders advanced up the Nile, they encountered stiffening resistance from the Egyptian forces led by the young and capable Sultan al-Salih Ayyub. Despite initial success, the French army began to face challenges: the scorching Egyptian heat, the unfamiliar terrain, and the constant threat of enemy attacks. The situation grew increasingly perilous as the Crusaders found themselves trapped in a narrow strip of land between the river and the desert, vulnerable to encirclement. The stage was set for a decisive confrontation at the Battle of al-Mansura, a fortified city strategically located on the Nile, which lay directly in the path of the Crusaders. It was here that the fate of the Seventh Crusade would be determined. Jean de Joinville, a knight and close advisor to King Louis IX, accompanied the king on the Seventh Crusade. His first-hand account of the Battle of al-Mansura provides a unique glimpse into medieval warfare. He describes the events as follows.
I and my knights had decided to go and attack some Turks who were loading their baggage in their camp on our left. So we fell on them. As we were pursuing them through the camp, I caught sight of a Saracen on the point of mounting his horse. One of his knights was holding the bridle. At the moment he had both of his hands on the saddle to pull himself up, I gave him a thrust with my lance just under the armpit and struck him dead. On seeing this, his knight left his lord and the horse, and thrusting his lance at me as I passed, caught me between the shoulders, pinning me down to the neck of my horse in such a way that I couldn't draw the sword at my belt. I therefore had to draw the sword attached to my horse. When he saw me with my sword drawn, he withdrew his lance and left. As I was coming back, the Turks thrust at me with their lances. Under the weight of their attack, my horse was brought to its knees and I went flying forward over its ears. I got up as soon as I could, with my shield at my neck and sword in hand. One of my knights, named Erard de Sivary, may God grant him grace, came to me and advised our drawing back towards a ruined house where we could wait for the king, who was on his way. But as we were going there, some on foot and some on horseback, a great body of Turks came rushing at us, bearing me to the ground and riding over my body so that my shield went flying from my neck. As soon as they had passed, Erard de Sivary came back to me and took me with him to the walls of the house. While we were there, the Turks attacked us from all sides. Some of them got into the house and pricked us with their lances from above. My knights asked me to hold on to their horses' bridles, which I did, for fear the beasts should run away. Then they put up a vigorous defence against the Turks. During this incident, Hugh de Cotte received 3 wounds in the face from a lance, and so did Raoul de Wanou, while Frederick de Lupe had a lance thrust between his shoulders, which made so large a wound that the blood poured from his body as if from the bunghole of a barrel. A blow from one of the enemy's swords landed in the middle of Erard de Sivary's face, cutting through his nose so that it was left dangling over his lips. Just as I had uttered a prayer, he said to me, "My lord, if you think that neither I nor my heirs will incur reproach for it, I will go and fetch you help from the Comte d'Anjou, whom I see in the fields over there." I said to him, "My dear man, it seems to me that you would win great honour for yourself if you went for help to save our lives. Your own, by the way, is also in great danger." I spoke truly, for he died of his wound. As I stood there on foot with my knights, wounded as I have told you, King Louis came up at the head of his battalion with a great sound of shouting, trumpets and kettle drums. He halted with his troops on a raised causeway. Never have I seen a finer or more handsome knight. He seemed to tower head and shoulders above all his people. On his head was a gilded helmet, and a sword of German steel was in his hand. The moment he stopped, those good knights in his division whom I have already named to you, together with other valiant knights of his, flung themselves right at the Turks. It was, I can assure you, a truly noble passage of arms, for no one there drew either bow or crossbow. It was a battle of maces against swords between the Turks and our people, with both sides inextricably entangled.
The Battle of Al-Mansura initially seemed promising. The Crusaders, with their superior armoured knights, were confident in their ability to defeat the Egyptian forces. They had successfully captured the city of Damietta and were advancing towards Cairo, the heart of the Ayyubid Sultanate. Despite initial successes, the French were unable to maintain their momentum and quickly lost control of the situation due to a series of impetuous decisions. The French force, divided into 3 detachments, launched a surprise attack on the Egyptian camp 2 miles from the royal palace in Al-Mansura. However, the attack quickly devolved into a chaotic pursuit of fleeing Egyptian cavalry, led by the impetuous Count of Artois. This reckless charge led the French deep into the city of Mansoura, where they were ambushed by the Egyptians. The ensuing battle within the city was a catastrophe for the French. The narrow streets and alleyways of Mansoura proved to be a death trap for the heavily armoured knights. The Egyptian forces were able to regroup and launch counterattacks, inflicted heavy casualties on the disorganised French forces, including the deaths of key commanders and a significant portion of their elite cavalry. The survivors were forced to retreat, enduring further hardships and setbacks. Louis IX himself was captured, and the French were forced to negotiate a humiliating peace treaty. Despite the catastrophic outcome, Louis IX's suffering during the Crusade contributed to his eventual sainthood. His unwavering faith and perseverance, even in the face of adversity, earned him admiration and respect throughout Christendom.